In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, as we've been reading the teachings of Jesus over the last several weeks, one of the things that he did is he made a series of statements that start with the words, I am. We call them the I am statements of Jesus. Think about them. I am the Good Shepherd. I am the bread of life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the light of the world. And today he tells us that he is the vine. Each one of those tells us a little bit more about the character of God. The character of God as compared to a good shepherd, as compared to being light for the world, a way of being the way and the truth and the life. And today we learn a little about the character of God as the vine. So in this parable, Jesus says there are three players. There's a vine dresser, the gardener. There's the vine. And then there are branches. Now it seems pretty clear, but let me just state the obvious, that the vineyard belongs to the gardener. The vineyard belongs to the vine dresser. And Jesus said, that's the Father. Now that's important because the disciples, the same as all of us, we tend to be born with selfish instincts. Think about it. It doesn't take very long before a toddler learns two one-word sentences. No and mine. And it doesn't matter what it is they have in their hand, right? It could be that old crushed coffee cup in the wastebasket, or it might be grandma's wedding ring. Either one, let me have that. No. Mine. You think about it, it's crazy. I mean, little children have no idea the value of things, but yet they immediately understand this idea about possession. What is mine? And you know what? We don't grow out of that. By the time we're 30 or 50 or 60 or 80, how many times, think about it, have we looked up to heaven and said, but God, that was mine. That's mine. But God, that was my good health, and I want it back. It's mine. But God, I earned that money. How did the stock market, why did it drop like that and I lost all that money? That was my retirement. It was mine. But God, says the woman at the freshly dug grave, he was mine. But God, this is my freedom. I have plans this year. I worked for them. And now look, that freedom was mine. And I don't want to change my plans. And no, says God to the 2-year-old in each one of us. And he says, no, it wasn't yours at all. That was not your husband. That wasn't your wife. Those plans, they weren't yours. Oh, that freedom, that wasn't yours either. Neither was that job. In fact, you are not even yours. It all belongs to me. It all belongs to me, and I am God. See, in the vineyard, God the Father is the gardener. This is his vineyard. It's his garden. And the gardener knows what's best for the plants and for the vines in his garden. And a good plant simply trusts and cooperates with the gardener. Right? As a gardener, you know a plant that cooperates with what you're trying to do makes a big difference and will become more productive. See, that's the image I think Jesus wants us to see today. But you know what? That's a hard one for us to swallow because we want to be the one in control. If there's 4 adults in a car, I can guarantee you at least 3 of them think they should be the one driving because the driver isn't driving right. Certain aspects of our lives are out of our control right now, aren't they? And we don't like it. We want to be the ones in control. We know best when the stores and the churches and the businesses should reopen. We know best. And one says it should be right now, should have been a week ago. And someone else says, oh no, not yet. Way too soon. We all want to be in control, but none of us are. And we resist that. We resist not having control. And often we think true freedom is the right to do what we want, the way we want, when we want to do it. And nobody better get in my way. And we define that as our freedom. But friends, that's not God's freedom. In God's freedom, we acknowledge He is the one in control, not us. We follow where He directs, not our whims and wishes, hunches, and gut feelings. But that's a whole other sermon. I just want to be clear today that we're branches, and the vine dresser, the gardener, directs the branches. Well, that's the bad news. That's the bad news, that you and I are not in control. And we accept the fact that we have to be branches and not the gardener, and nor are we the vine. By not being the vine, it means we have no life within us of ourselves. We don't have it. We only get that through the vine. So we're the branches. That's the bad news. The good news is that means we don't have to carry the weight of controlling everything on our own shoulders. We don't have to carry the weight of the branch. We leave that to the vine. That's the job of the vine, is to hold up the branches. And leave it to the vine dresser, who carefully ties up each branch so that it will grow well and be productive. Our job as a branch is to bear fruit. That's the job. Bear fruit. See, that's impossible, I think, to miss in this parable as Jesus tells it. God wants as much fruit as possible from your life and mine. So your job and mine, bear fruit. Now, anytime Jesus talks about being the vine, he's always talking about growth. That's the whole point, isn't it? The growth of the branches. So this parable is actually about growth and how the branches grow. And he uses this word fruit again and again. He says, branch, in me you have the potential for growth. Potential for enormous change in your life. From this tiny little bud to this great branch with great bunches of grapes. Great fruit. That's the potential you have. That, in fact, is what I intend for you. All the fruit that you're going to produce. But what kind of change is he talking about then in us as his people? What's he talking about? Well, in the New Testament, anytime we see the word fruit, it always relates to character traits. Character traits, like the fruits of the Spirit. You can find those in the 5th chapter of Galatians: love and joy and peace, patience. That includes forgiving. Kindness, which includes things like unselfishness. Goodness, which involves integrity. Faithfulness, which is courage. Gentleness, which embraces humility. And then, of course, self-control. Jesus says he is the key to all of that taking hold in you and me. He is the key. Your character and mine can be defined by those virtues: love, joy, peace, self-control, and all the rest, if we are connected with Jesus. But how does that happen? How does that happen? How does the selfish person actually become kind? How does the whiner become a giver? How does the controlling person become someone freeing and liberating? How does the worrier become a confident rock? How does the bigot become understanding and compassionate? How does the cowardly person become courageous? How does that happen? It might be one of the most relevant questions for all of our society, and certainly is for each of us as individuals. How does that kind of change in a person actually occur? By drawing our life from the vine. By drawing our life from Jesus. That's how it happens. See, Jesus is totally engaged with making you and me into great producers of fruit. Jesus says, I want to hook you up to me so my power flows into you and you become productive of fruit in this world. That's what he's telling us. That's what happens in a vineyard, isn't it? The life-giving power of the vine flows out into the branches, and the branches grow and develop and produce. As we get to the close of that parable today, verses 13 and 14 of John 15, Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. You know, you can look at various translations of that passage, different scripture translations and interpretations, and that word friends is always translated the same way. You are my friends. If you cooperate with the vine and produce fruit, you are his friend. Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, friends, you will be my friends if you work your fingers to the bone for me. You will be my friend if your life becomes so busy you don't know where to turn next. He doesn't say any of that. He says, you'll be my friends if you do what I ask you to do. If you command, you follow my commands. See, some of us, it's easy, isn't it, to become focused on the Christian life and think it's a life of busyness. It's a life of doing lots and lots of good and trying to find more to do. And that's all a nice outgrowth of our life. But instead, what Jesus says, before you go doing all that, be my friend. I want to be your friend. We start to think that God surely must love me because of all that I do for him. All the times that I speak for him, and I always speak right wherever I go. Surely he must love me for that. And he says, that's fine, but I want you to be my friend. And you know what? If we're not his friend and we're just working for him, then we don't change very much. And in fact, we probably get burned out eventually and frustrated. And we end up alienating other people because we're out of sorts, because we're working so hard. And we're not drawing life from the vine, and so we're not producing much fruit. We're not taking our life from the vine. That's what it means to be his friend. You know, sometimes I think that the Christian life, I've heard new Christians become a Christian, they think they're going to do that because it's going to clean up their life. And that might be a good thing. Their life may need some cleaning up. But Jesus says, I don't just want your clean life. I want you as a friend. I didn't come to torment your old life and make it hard for you. I actually came to kill it. Your old life. Not just to make it uncomfortable. I came to kill your old life. And replace it with new life, my own life. My own life will become your life. The life in me will come into you. That's what I want, Jesus says. See, he wants to become our reason for everything we do. So being Christian means that Jesus is the very reason we get out of bed in the morning. But how? How, we ask? How do we vitally connect to Jesus, to this vine, so we can become fruitful? How do we do that? Well, the first thing, and maybe the most important thing, is about the knife. The knife. Sue and I used to live in a house where on the property behind us a man owned, he had several nice acres, and some of it this beautiful southeast-facing hillside that he planted full of grapevines. He was a gardener and a vine dresser, and he loved his vines. And he probably had 60 or 70 plants that he cared for very, very carefully, very meticulous in the way he cared for those vines. And I was talking with him one day early on when we had met, and he was telling me about his vines. And he explained to me that he has to prune the vines every year. And he does it very carefully. Oh, I take 2 or 3 over here, and I take one there, and then this one looks like I need to do it. He said, you can watch if you want. And he had this knife, and he cut off all these pieces of the vines. Some of them looked good. I mean, the whole place looked like a disaster to me. Some of those branches looked like they had been healthy. Some of them had little bunches of grapes beginning to form, and he cut them off. And I said, why are you cutting off things that look good? When I prune something, I just prune off what looks dead. He said, oh no. Everything that I cut off was a loss if I kept it. And everything that I kept was gain. It was a gain if I lost it, because these branches, to reach their fullness, have to be pruned. Everything cut off was a loss to keep, but a gain to lose. Now see, because we live in a fallen world, and we do, don't we? The knife, so to speak, falls on everybody. Pain, strife, comes into every single life. And when it does, we know the pain, and we cry out. There were times when he would trim those branches, that gardener, and the branches would then, it was like they were weeping. Water, sap was dripping out of those cuts. The life-giving fluid that ran through those vines were now coming out those cuts. It was like the branches were actually weeping. But see, there's one thing. It's a matter of whether the cut on us from pain and strife, when the knife strikes us, it's a matter of whether we are cut off completely or are we pruned for growth. 2 different things can happen. Some of those branches were pruned to grow, and others were cut off to die on the ground. See, when Jesus comes into our life and he prunes off things that we want, things that destroy the plans we had, that allows all these difficulties, we cry out to him and we say, what are you doing? And Jesus says, friend, you don't understand gardening. I will not cut off anything that you need. Oh, you're cutting off this. You're not letting me do that. I used to do this. I can't. I will not cut off anything you need. He doesn't do it to make us suffer. The knife comes to every branch. And if you're connected to Jesus, to the vine, then the troubles of life, the pain, the sufferings we go through actually make us stronger, not weaker. Wiser, not stupid. Not smaller, but actually greater, more productive. But if you're not connected to him, that same knife, which comes to all of us, will come and it cuts us off. See, if connected to Jesus, we'll be pruned to greatness, and if not, we're cut off. One choice leads to abundant life. The other choice leads to death on the ground. Why is that? Because pruning makes us draw more and more on the vine. Pruning makes us want more, seek more, draw more life out of the vine now into this branch. And the more we draw on the joy of God and his life, the more we begin to pray, the more we soak in and read Scripture and relate to God. Not just get busy doing lots of things, but spend time as we would with a friend. Then we start to draw more and depend more and more on his life and his power to drive us day by day. See, that's the message Jesus has here in this parable. That's what he was trying to tell his disciples. Stay connected to me, guys. Friends. Before we finish, though, I think it's worth stepping back a minute and looking for a moment even at the bigger picture here of God's plan as it relates to this parable. Jesus was cut off that we might only need to be cut back. As hard as the knife feels when it strikes us and we are cut back, it felt much worse for him because the knife actually resulted in his death. Now I want you to remember, follow me on this. Back in Genesis, Adam and Eve are forced out of the garden. And what did God put at the gate of the garden? He put a sword there. He put a sword at the gate of the garden. Basically the message was, coming back into friendship with me, back into a relationship with me, is going to require bloodshed. That's what the sword meant at the gate. Now I want you to go forward to the times of the great temple. The temple in Jerusalem was built, and in the middle of that temple was the innermost place. It was the Holy of Holies. And once a year, the high priest on Yom Kippur would come in, and he was allowed to go back into the Holy of Holies. But to get there, he had to pass the great altar. And on that altar, a lamb would be slain, and blood would pour down. Blood was shed before someone could go back into the presence, the very presence of God himself. Jesus was cut off when he died. His blood was shed that he was left on the ground to die, that we might only be cut off and able to come back again into his presence and to tap into his life and bear fruit. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two. It was open now. You could now enter without need of another sacrifice. The last one, the one, had happened. See, when we draw on the Lord's power, when we draw on his joy and purpose and fulfillment, we grow into something great in the eyes of God, something fruitful in his eyes. Now, there's lots of opportunities in the garden to be discouraged, aren't there? Gardeners know that. There's weeds, there's insects, there's all sorts of things that will hinder the production of healthy fruit, and we deal with those things all the time in our life. There's so many things that get in the way of us continuing to nurture a friendship with Jesus. We know that. We could become discouraged. But we have no idea of the amazing thing he wants to make of us. Let me close with this image. Tim Keller tells this story as a way to think about this. He says, imagine yourself as a living house. Imagine you're a living house, and God comes in, and the first thing he does is he cleans up all the critical things that need work. Oh, he fixes that plumbing, he fixes that leak in the roof, he takes care of addictions, this out of control anger that you have a problem with, the unfaithfulness that has found its way into your life, and he fixes those things. No surprise. We know those things need to be cleaned up, and we understand that he would do that. And then he starts knocking the whole house apart. And it doesn't seem to make any sense. He's changing things now that I had no intention of wanting to change. What is he up to? What's he doing with my life now? He's building an entirely different house. He's going to take and add a room over here. He's going to add a beautiful patio out back, and he's going to add that guest suite over on the other side, and then out front he's going to put columns across the front. You thought he was building just a little cottage for you. He was building a palace for you, and he wants to come and live there in you, with you, as a friend. I am the true vine. The Father is the vine dresser, and you are the branches. And together they intend greatness for you and for me. Amen.
Amen.